So hello again and welcome everyone to Designing for Finance. I'm Shakib Labidi. I'm the founder of UX Playground. And before we start, I want to uh, thank all of you for taking the time to join us and to share our experience and learn from the panel. And of course, from you, the audience, your members, about designing for finance. So my personal background is product design. I've been working as a designer for a few decades now, and uh, this has led me to create this lovely community of over 2,000, no, it was 3,500 members of really ambitious and passionate people on the Meetup. So if you're not a Meetup member yet, please join us as members. We have lots of interesting events, not only interesting, but also exciting projects to be announced very shortly. But for this evening, we're here to meet, of course, everyone, and that includes our team. And as you can see already on the screen, we have Jazz, who's our co-host. Hello,
Hello.
Jazz.
Hello.
We have Nat. We have Jasmina, who is the
Me.
event coordinator, and she is basically the one who will go out in the online and will check the internet for your um, posts, your things that your screenshots and your experience that you share from this event on social media, mainly on LinkedIn and Twitter, because if you are here for the first time, you will be surprised to hear that we do have really nice raffle prizes. So it's worth putting in the work and sharing your experience online. And of course, we have Natalie, who is the person
Hello.
behind all of this, making sure that we technically everything runs smoothly. And she has also that creative part in creating this event with all of us. And yes, of course, we have also our panelists. And let me just go to the other slide because as you can see, it's on the left-hand side here, or not see, but I tell you. Our sponsors, of course, we want to say a big thank you to Adobe XD, eSynergy, and Sync, who is our new sponsor. And they have lovely Apple, they are Apple resellers, and also they provide the educational sector with hardware, Apple hardware. And they sponsored our prize today. And also Rosenfeld Media, who is a um, publishing company, and they specialized in anything related to UX design, and they have amazing titles. And let me just go to the next slide. So, and this one is a favorite slide of mine because these hearts just indicates obviously that we have people joining from all over the world, and we're always happy that people are now able these days to join from many parts of the world and connect with us, and we feel very humbled and very proud at the same time that we attract so many different people and we have a really diverse audience. Not everyone is a designer, and that's exactly what we want. We want everyone to learn how we can create better experience for all of us. And I'm aware of time as usual, but let's go to the agenda. So we're going to start this off with the welcome, which I'm doing now, and then we're going to hear from our panelists. And I'm very excited to introduce you to three amazing people. They're not only great at what they do, but also really nice to talk to. And I'm pretty sure that you will have lots of questions to share with our panelists, and hopefully you can engage in discussions. There will be the opportunity for you to share your camera if you want to. Just let us know. And of course, we have that is our Q&A session, which comes after the introduction of each of our panelists. And we also have the raffle. Remember, I mentioned it before, you use our hashtag UX Playground in Twitter or LinkedIn. Just share a nice screenshot, maybe a nice line with it, and you will enter the raffle, which again is quite exciting. And some of you already know what kind of prizes we have, thanks to our amazing sponsors. And of course, then it's the time to say goodbye. But our next event is already planned, and that will be announced very shortly for February. But I think it's just about time now. I think one more thing to say here is in the application Zoom, that is, you have the Q&A part. Please post your question there so that we can start uh, basically making sure that we understand what type of questions you have, and we can use them as soon as we have done the introduction and go into the Q&A part. And I think, yes, that's what I mentioned already. UX Playground hashtag, please use that on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you will be able to enter the raffle later on. Now, it's time to introduce our panelists. And like I said, I'm very happy to have, basically all of our panelists are experts in finance, as you might have guessed, based on the topic that we have. But also everyone is an eSynergy associate, and we work a lot with eSynergy, and they provide us with really interesting experts. And we have all these we had these great experts in the past covering lots of different areas in design. So today we're gonna hear from Dimitris, from Annaliese and Jackie, and the three share obviously the finance, the experience of working in the finance industry, especially covering the creative part and the research part. They are responsible for these products and this experience that we have, both on the client side and as well on the customer side, or I should say for the business side and the customer side. And I would like to dive straight into getting Dimitris involved. Hi, Dimitris.
Hello. Hi.
How are you?
Good. Good. Thank you for inviting me.
Sorry?
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's great to have you, and I'm 100% sure that our members would like to know what it is that you do at HSBC.
Sure. Let me share my screen. I just wanted to introduce myself, a couple of slides, I guess, better do it visually. So, hi, my name is Dimitris Kontaris. I'm a user experience designer, and I started a few years ago, actually. The first company I worked for was called Red Kite Financial Markets. So my first job was literally in finance, and it happened to be a startup. So I was the only UX designer in a financial environment within a startup. So that was basically thrown into deep and asked to swim. But it was actually a good learning experience because I learned things like stakeholder management and KPIs and business requirements and user requirements. So it was a really good learning process there. And then I was part of a merger and acquisition because Nice Actimize happened to buy Red Kite. So now I just happen to be the only UX designer in a bigger company. And I was also lucky enough to work with people across the world because even though we were based in London, in the UK, part of the team was based in Israel and the other part was based in New York. So I got an experience working with geographically disparate teams. After that, I joined Accenture, which so I got experience there working within a consultancy environment, and I was lucky enough to be part of different projects. Some of them were in finance, some in the oil industry, but that actually helped me a lot to sharpen my stakeholder management skills and sales pitch, and justify obviously the design decisions. And after that, I went to Thomson Reuters, where it was the first in-house company that we were building a B2B, apart from obviously Redcar and Nice Actimize. We're building B2B products, and I was part of the Icon team, if anyone knows about that. And it was really good to see how we can get data and how to use this data in order to make design decisions, and how difficult sometimes is to find customers who work in finance to help us with usability testing sessions, especially if they're traders. So that was a very interesting and really good experience there. And after that, I joined HSBC about 5 years ago. And currently I'm heading the design team for the Kinetic app. If everyone has heard of it, it's basically a new app that allows you to create a business account, and it's the first app within HSBC that is follows an end-to-end process. So you're able to create the account from the app. And in terms of what I'm doing for my creativity outside of these industries is basically taking pictures. I like doing photography on the side. Unfortunately, with COVID, that was a bit limited, but still was able to get a few shots, and also play and compose music. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you very much, Dimitris. Very impressive, and especially that you have worked with so many different companies and had the chance to really learn how the different parts of the business work. And I presume that you had some very interesting projects that you worked on, which hopefully in the Q&A part, you can tell us a little bit more about it. Thank you so much. Annaliese is the lead user researcher at HM Land Registry. And Annaliese, our members, I'm sure, are very keen to learn what it is like to work as a researcher as Land Registry.
Well, thank you, Shakib. So I don't have any nice slides like Dimitri, unfortunately, but I will just give a little bit of background, a little bit of information about me, so that when we do get to the Q&A, you know what you might want to ask me. So I live in the north of England in a tiny little village. Our only amenity is a pub, which obviously hasn't been open lately. And the village is located at the foot of Pendle Hill, where the famous witch trials were held. And I'm very grateful to have countryside on my doorstep, obviously, especially during lockdown. But professionally, living in this location has caused some challenges, I suppose, and affected my route into being a user researcher, which is a reason for explaining where I live. So I came from an academic background. Before moving into digital, I was doing like psychology research at university and was published, and I've since done a master's as well in psychology. But following that, I was looking into what the digital world is like and working in digital, because research options are also limited in the north. So I was dipping my toe in various areas, including a course in developing in Python. Not very well, I might add, but I did. I should try my hand at developing. And then I found out about UX, and obviously I was hooked because the two worlds collided, and I focused on learning everything I could about user-centered design and user research. And at the time, user research wasn't really a role in digital in the north either. So I moved into account management role at a digital agency, which involved growing client accounts, project managing, and also being the resident user research specialist. So I was working with a variety of different clients, from larger organisations to local SMEs, and some of which were professional services such as solicitors and accountants, which obviously working with those businesses gave me a really good understanding of those kind of business needs, and allowed me to transition into a user research role at the Court Bank when they first advertised for a user research role. So prior to that, they'd had designers and they'd had content designers within the UX team who were doing their own research, but no dedicated user researcher. So moving into that space was obviously very interesting, being the first one in the organisation. Luckily for me, one of the designers had a very strong passion for user research and advocated for it being a distinct role, and she became my manager and mentor at the bank. I'm hugely grateful to her, and obviously her successful pursuit in getting user research at the bank, as it was my first step into the financial sector, really, bar the sort of accountants that I'd worked with. Meant that I learned a lot very, very quickly about fighting for you are to be at the table and what's effective and what isn't effective. And whilst I worked at the bank, I became the research manager there and grew the team to a team of 3 researchers. So we had to figure out how we worked most effectively across digital and with the rest of the UX team. And whilst I worked at the Court Bank, I learned about government digital service standards as well, which later resulted in me moving into public sector roles and working at HMRC. I worked on customer services with Jackie, actually, and that included import VAT payments. So it wasn't financial in the sense of the banks, but there was that financial element to that service. Obviously, HMRC is seen as the public sector department that is all about finances. And I've also been at the Ministry of Justice and now at Land Registry, as Shakib mentioned, not finance related, but more to do with how we are going to be able to properly embed user research into that department. So yeah, that's me. I think I've stuck to about 5 minutes.
Fantastic. No, it's nice that you connect everything and that our members learn really about your personal journey, right? It is sometimes hard to understand where people actually, how they got to where they are. And even if you follow them on LinkedIn and look at their profile, it's those personal stories and the bits that you add that make us understand where you're coming from and where you are now, basically. Thank you so much, Annaliese. And Jackie. Hello, Jackie.
Hi. Right, I think I'll share my screen as well. It might help me with a
Fantastic.
prompt here. Tell me if you can see it.
Yes,
Are
we see
we
your
okay?
desktop.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I thought I would start with my where I started out, which was front-end design in 1996. So really you're talking about when we used to call it the World Wide Web, when the internet started out. And I came out of university with a degree in English literature in the middle of a recession, and I went straight into temping, so secretarial temping. And I was back living with my parents, and I didn't really know what it was that I wanted to do. But I ended up in this place called MBA Systems. And they decided that they liked me after a week and did I want to interview for a job as a receptionist? I was like, well, you know, I want to do something that builds on my degree. So the guy who was interviewing me looked at my CV and he said, oh, well, I see you've got an art degree, which wasn't quite true. I was like, yeah. So he said, have you heard of the internet? And I was like, well, my dad's got it, but I didn't really know what it was. And he said, well, we need a web designer. So do you think you can do that? And I said, yes. And that got me into this job as a web designer in 1996. So starting out in financial design, I can't tell you how much we relied basically on the paper stuff that had gone before. So I've been on this thing called Wayback Machine, which shows you some very old websites. So it's taken a kind of cut right back in 1996. So this was my first website that I ever designed. And it was designed for a private client stockbroker off a paper brochure. And you can see how actually I've just scanned this stuff in, and we didn't really even have much in the way of tools. But it was very paper centric. So looking back on this, it's been really interesting for me to see just how different it was and how fancy we thought we were when we did this thing like the CCM navigator, where you put in a little form field and you press submit and it tells you which brochure that it thinks you ought to order off them. You know, so it was very much at that beginning stage where there was data out there, but actually it wasn't freely available over the web. These people that I was working for were selling systems that they had to go in and install. But over the years, you could see it change from being brochure websites to actually fundamentally integrating the financial information into their products and services. So when I left there, I was riding the dot-com boom and started work at thestreet.co.uk, which is a financial website, working with a load of financial journalists. And that pulled me into a job in Reuters. I didn't work with Dimitris as far as I know, but we must have been working there at similar times, working on a financial specialist team. So lots of data, lots of numbers and lines, integrated with financial news. And it was around that point I started thinking, actually, there must be more to it than that. So why do people click where they click, and where do they look, and what's the psychology of this? So I went and did a master's degree in user experience, which got me into consulting, which then helped me learn about, I don't know, client management and stakeholder management. And when I left there, I started working at the NHS. That was about, well, back in 2009. I had a couple of children. And then since then, really, I've worked for just big organizations, not necessarily always financial, but always something that you probably think of as an institution. So Aviva, which is, so NHS is a National Health Service, which is massive, biggest employer in England. Aviva is insurance, Npower, which is like an electric company. I worked at HSBC as well as the design lead on this secure access, and with Annaliese at Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs in the middle of the Brexit era, which was exciting and interesting and odd. And now I'm working in the National Health Service in the middle of COVID. So that's my story.
Fantastic. I think the idea of going back in time, this is something that when we had our meeting, the first meeting basically that where we ask all panelists to come together just to get to know each other and to bounce off ideas with regards to the topics that we would like to discuss. And obviously, it's very much driven by the questions that you will be asking now. And please keep adding your questions into the Q&A section down there in the app. And we were talking about the fact that Jackie has such a great, Jackie has such a great vast amount of experience, right, over time, and that sharing this information it will help also, especially the younger generation, to understand where we're coming from and why we are doing certain things the way we do them today. And I thought that was quite nice to highlight. And thank you so much, Jackie. I do believe that we're now at a position where actually everyone, hopefully, today will have an understanding of where each of these panelists, basically what their background is and what they represent, and possibly what kind of questions you want to ask them. And as this event is for you, we're going to open this up now to you, and I hand over to Jazz.
Yeah, so obviously, as Shakib mentioned before, we can, if you have questions, feel free to drop it into the Q&A. And if you're comfortable enough to, and you actually want to talk to them in person, just raise your hand and I'll add you into the call so you can actually ask them directly. So is there anyone that's interested in asking a question in person? Feel free to raise your hand, which is a icon at the bottom if you can see it. If not, we do have a question from Scott, who will answer this live for you, if you're okay for me to share that. So he's saying here, in terms of financial space, are there any differences you've seen in terms of customer and user expectations of UI or UX compared to non-financial spaces?
Can I answer this one?
Yeah.
So there, I think the expectations change over time, and with people using applications, from the two major ecosystems with Apple and Android and Google, they have certain expectations to how. And I'm talking about the apps now, and we can talk about the web after that. But they have certain expectations as to how the app will respond, what type of interactions to expect. So they in the past there was, I guess, an expectation for the financial applications to be a bit more slow or clunky or not be as refined. But over time, with new players in game in terms of finance, I've seen the landscape changing a little bit. So the personal finance, as an example, in the business finance now tend to merge in terms of customer expectations from a user experience standpoint. So that's my view.
Sorry, I realised I didn't introduce Scott, but I hope that's answered your question. Was there anything else that you wanted answered?
No, that was, I come from a primarily advertising and marketing background. I moved in-house where I'm at now, so it's just kind of a bridging that gap between that marketing, messaging-driven side and what that looks like in terms of users in a very specific space. So I think that really kind of touched on what I was wondering about there.
Yeah, could I make a comment here as well? I think the biggest difference that I sort of identified was that users, when they're interacting with and choosing a bank, are looking for an institution that they can trust. They're not in the mindset that they're buying a product, which is often the way that unfortunately it's spoken about within the financial business. It's they're buying a savings account, they're buying a mortgage, but that's not the way that users are expecting to interact, because they see it more as somewhere that they trust where they're going to put or get their money from. So I think that affected a lot in terms of the user's expectations of the journey online and the app and the way that they're interacting with even individuals at the bank, like support teams or in the branch.
Okay, was there anyone else that wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, your relationship with a financial institution, if it is an institution you go with, can be very, very, very long term. So sometimes that just gives a good perspective on things as a designer. So I was working at HSBC on login registration, and I think people really thought a lot about the length of the registration process. But actually, when you look at it in terms over time of these customers who are in the bank 20 or 30 years, that even if there was a slight difficulty in getting over the registration process and the things that we're asking of them in order to keep it secure, it kind of is a drop in the ocean in terms of that much longer relationship with it.
Okay, great. I hope that's answered your question, Scott. So I'm just going to move on to another person who's here as an anonymous. So I haven't designed for the financial space yet, but I've heard there's a lot of legal considerations that restrict design's decisions. So are there any stories you can share with this happening with your team, and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, I can. So it is true. It's true. There are a few restrictions. They are general restrictions that every bank needs to abide by, which obviously have to be followed. And we have to be up to date with these restrictions because they tend to change every now and then. So they have to reflect back to design. But then it is also the each bank, I guess, has its own risk appetite, if you like. So the way these restrictions now and the way the law is interpreted by different institutions tends to vary. So if you look at big banks, they tend to be a bit more on the safe side. But some new startups might be a bit more, might have a bigger risk appetite. So the key point there is that what I'm trying to do is to use the traffic light system with legal. So red means no go, it's part of a regulation. Green means go, we're happy with it. And yellow is let's talk about it. Because sometimes when you present back designs, you need to understand whether legal comes back with a design decision or with a legal requirement. So that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of approaching it, Dimitri. I think it's really good. At the Court Bank, they were very risk averse. Like you say, the risk appetite differs from institution to institution. And when you said in your question, it's disappeared now, we had some examples where we would we'd have to go through quite a few levels of sign off, one of which being legal, and the content would come back to us from legal saying, no, you can't do that because it strays too far from what the financial conduct regulators says we should be saying. And we started moving towards trying to get legal involved in the conversation as early as possible, because obviously if you get them involved at the end of the conversation, it's far too late, whereas it can be quite difficult to involve them in a truly iterative process early on, because to get their time can be difficult. But if you can manage to get somebody on the legal team to engage in the conversations as early as possible, and even be at like regular show and tells, it does help ease that, and hopefully you won't end up at the end with something that just fails sign off and it's a curveball. So that's kind of how we started dealing with it. And I can imagine you incorporating that system that you just described, Dimitri, into that and having them along the journey as much as possible.
Okay, sounds great. So I'm going to invite Dexter in as well and see if he has a question that he would like to share with us.
Oh, hello.
Welcome.
Hi.
So my question was, because I work kind of in the back end of a lot of these apps, how important do you feel that bugs and slowdowns are to user retention relative to other factors?
So
Do you mean specifically for financial or generally?
For example, with connecting to bank accounts through open banking, the availability is notoriously bad. So it's unavailable for maybe 3 days out of the year.
That's right. I can kick it up the answer off. From my experience as an example, I don't know for the specific open banking example that you mentioned, but the infrastructure is very important, and it has to reflect back to the user experience, because as an example, caching of data is one thing we could talk about, because if the legal team mentions that the data needs to be present, needs to be refreshed every time you visit a specific page, then the data is not cached. So then the interface will have to talk to the backend server, and the backend server will need to pull data every time you visit a specific page. I'm just using this as an example. So it'd be good then to have discussions with both legal and the backend to see how we can work around it. So for instance, you could say the data will be cached for every time the customer is logged in. And when they log out, then it's good to clear this data. But I don't remember which UX law is this one, but it's about the optimal interaction between computer and machine is about 0.4 seconds or something like that. Google it and find out. But anything above that starts becoming a bit uncomfortable, and if they have to go through many screens, it will start becoming annoying. And it is a very important question, because it is something that is overlooked, because we tend to see screens, or we tend to see succession of screens, but the build itself, once we use it, also needs to be usable, and speed is one of these metrics.
Sounds great. Hope that answered your question, Dexter.
No, that was really good. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I've got another question here from Danielle. So I don't know if she wants to, she's happy to share this herself, or if not, then I'm just going to quickly shout that out for you. So is finance UX increasingly moving into mobile space? How many relevant users are still into the desktop environment?
So I think that one of my interesting observations, having been a researcher and designer in the financial space for banking, is that they're across both. So you can't really design just for mobile or just for desktop or just for tablet. You need to design across the whole gamut of those things. And actually, people are double screening all the time. There are multiple devices. So it's more of a conversation between the devices that people are using at once. So I wouldn't worry too much about desktop or mobile. It's desktop and mobile.
Okay, is there anything else anyone to add to that before we jump onto another question? We good? Okay, I'm going to ask another person to join us. So Faria, if you're happy to share your question with us.
Hi everyone. I'm a UX designer, and well, actually on a transition stage from coming from an architecture background to entering the digital UX scenario. So as a beginner designer, I would like to ask you, what does the research and iteration in the fintech in creating a UX for finance, what did it look like for you? And if you could share some stories on that.
I guess, would it be Annaliese?
Could you clarify the question for me, Faria? Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can hear you. Just needs the question repeated, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. No worries. No worries. So my question to you was, if you could share your story and experience on how did the research and the iteration in designing a UX for example, an HSBC or any fintech environment, what does it look like? What does it involve? So please share that.
Okay, well, it will obviously differ as well at all the different institutions, and fintech will be different again, and that's not something I've got experience in, but maybe Dimitri or Jackie might have. At the Court Bank, it was evolving when I was there, so it wasn't really embedded in the iterative process at that point, but as I left, we'd started with a couple of what they were calling cells, but to you and I, it would be a scrum team, and we were embedding research into that flow of work. So rather than research and design being treated a bit like an agency within the digital department, which is how it was traditionally and how it probably is at quite a lot of places still, we were trying to move away from that so that we could put research more into the build flow, if you will. And we were still in that process, so when I left. But at HMRC, we were doing something that is a bit more recognisable as to what you're describing, and Jackie will be aware as well, where the researcher was dedicated to the project team and involved in all of the ceremonies, so the stand-ups, the sprint planning, the show and tell, and working in an ideal situation, not always, but ideally several weeks ahead of the, what was going to go into build, to try and make sure that we've done the relevant research on that and we had confidence in what we were putting into build. Does that make sense? Yeah. Does that answer your question though, Faria?
Yeah. That's good. It's good for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Faria.
Thank you.
So Shakib, do you have any questions you would like to share?
I was wondering whether Dimitris wanted to add something because he was
Yes.
signaling it.
No,
Sorry, I didn't.
I can answer that from past experience of seeing that it depends obviously on the target audience and who the application is meant to be used by. But I've seen two fundamental differences between businesses for targeting businesses and businesses for targeting customers, the B2B and B2C, business to business and business to customer. So when it comes to business, there's an interesting dynamic there because your target audience, so the person who's going to be using the product, is not the person who is necessarily buying it. So they're not voting with their wallets. However, when it's a B2C, like it's an application, it's targeting customers, meaning that the person who's going to be using the product is the end user, and they're the one who's going to be purchasing it. So I found an interesting difference trying to recruit users and convince that this is good for the businesses when it comes to the B2B, business products, where you would need to find the traders as an example, or need to find who the people who are going to be using the products are, and go through their managers and sometimes people for marketing and sales, as opposed to the B2C products where you're targeting your customers directly and have a larger pool to sometimes choose from. So that was another experience.
Great, well, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, so I've got another question for you guys here. So this is from Jen. I'm watching and listening in from Atlanta. So a question is, what are some of the most common mistakes or incorrect assumptions you see made when designing a fintech product?
One for me was assuming that a shorter journey is a better journey. So we found when I was doing the account opening journeys for a product, we thought that the fewer screens people have or people go through means that the journey will be better received from the users. However, when we tested that, we found out that for important journeys like opening an account, people wouldn't mind going through more screens, as long as these screens describe what the step is going to look like in more detail. So that was a surprise to us.
Okay, great, thank you. So there's quite a few here as well. So I'll go through one of them, which is I'm gonna cut this quite short. So how could I learn more about this sector on design point of view and UX standards? So where could I learn this the standards from, the UX standards, and from a design point of view?
Oh, right. There used to be free services, but now everything is behind the paywall. Yeah. There's there's a website. It's called pttrn.com, like pattern.com, and they show screenshots of apps. So you could go there and see what they have. There are similar websites like that have screenshots of existing applications, and then you can see the interface there. But in terms of standards, I believe that there are patterns specifically for finance. I don't remember. I'll try to find out and get back to you. But there are some institutions that have their patterns and standards open for everyone to view and download. But other than that, most are behind the paywall.
Is that something that we could maybe share after the this event with our meetup on our meetup, Dimitris?
Yeah.
Okay,
great. Oh, fantastic.
So this is slightly different because one thing we probably haven't touched upon as much is accessibility practice. So we've got a question here: is which are the most recommended accessibility practices for designing a home banking?
So I think accessibility would be difference between desktop and mobile. And there are some guidelines that everyone needs to adhere to. The best practices. It depends on the type. Just trying to so because with accessibility you have obviously the making sure that the color is right and the hues are correct, and of course you have a toolkit and pattern library that deals with that. But when it comes to implementation itself, there are a few things that you need to make sure work. One of them would be to be accessible by voiceover. So it's a simple trick on both desktop and mobile that if you turn on accessibility and then you scan through the app, then you hear the app playing back to you what each element is. So as an example, one thing that our accessibility expert recommends is the ability for the keyboard to be able to be dismissed. But that's an example out of many. And on desktop, it's the same. If you enable accessibility on settings and you hover over a specific element, you want to make sure that it plays back in audio what the element is meant to be.
And I think it's accessibility is accessibility, no matter whether you're in finance or you're doing other things. So Annaliese and I did a project with a consultant from the NHS who was an ophthalmologist, and we went out and visited her clinic. And one of the things that we noticed was that although we try our best to design for accessibility all of the time, and we learn as much as we can about it, there is no kind of getting away from, you've got to go out and see people yourself and do user research and test with users yourself with whatever your product. So what we noticed was that, you know, people who were having problems with their eyes and with seeing screens, the first thing that they did was buy a bigger screen. And then they would say, okay, well, I'm standing at this massive screen. And one guy was saying, but then I can't see the keyboard that I'm using. And then somebody else would pipe up, and because it was a group kind of session, they'd say, oh, you can buy bigger keyboards, you know, with big letters on. So this kind of idea that it's not just about one thing, it's not just about blind or not blind, right? It's about, I'm losing my hearing as well. I can't see my keyboard. They're kind of pulling together loads and loads of software and hardware, bits and pieces on a journey where they've got more and more accessibility needs, and accessibility needs are different everywhere. So I think just learn as much as you can about accessibility, not specifically in one sector, but just, and go out and do testing with people and do your best to find candidates who have some sort of accessibility needs.
Yeah, just to echo that really. So it's not just about the the guidelines to make sure that your code's accessible, and there's good tips there to try and use the inbuilt screen readers to be able to test for yourself. But like Jackie said, getting out there and speaking to users is so important, and it's also important to realise that access needs are so varied. I ran a round of research with users with access needs on which you would think of it as like a financial statement, just your banking statement, when we were doing import VAT at customs at HMRC. So it looked very similar to what you would expect a statement to look like. But we tested this with users that have got various different access needs, including the likes of dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, and we found some really incredible things that had we not done that research with them, we wouldn't have found, and we were able to make amends to the design to actually improve the experience for them as well, which in turn it improved it for people that may also have that access need but may not, but it actually did improve it for a lot of people. So I'd say get out there and speak to people. It's incredibly humbling to do research with people with access needs as well. If you're not doing it, if you're not doing any research with people with access needs, you're definitely missing out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We've got so many wonderful questions coming through, and I'm conscious of time as well, because there is an exciting bit happening very soon. So what I'm going to do
Maybe
is
one more last question.
one more. Do you have enough time?
One more last.
Okay.
Yeah,
one
I think
more.
we
I
do.
did.
Yeah,
I mean, I did say I was going to say this live, but okay, I got one more question here. Sorry, Katia. So I will get this answered because it actually segues into what you were saying originally about researching and doing your user testing. So got a question here from Katia. So what are some specific constraints you have found when conducting qualitative research, with customers from business to business, financial services compared to other services? So do you think the knowledge and the processes there are more general for startup sectors that they could incorporate into that?
So the first part, so there are some constraints. One is finding them, finding as many people to do research as possible, because research will obviously influence the direction of the product, and also for usability testing as well, to make sure that what we made makes sense to the users. So one constraint is finding the customers of the target audience that you need, especially if it's a B2B service, because you have to go through all the steps. And the other one is ensuring that you get actionable results from that research. So one thing that I see sometimes is that the research results being presented, then you have a few people nodding, it's great, and then some are used, some aren't. So I guess a constraint there is to make sure it's making sure that whatever is found is analyzed and is seriously put into the product roadmap to be designed for or dealt with. The second part of the question, it's not there anymore.
Sorry, I can find it for you. So the second part, well, I think there was more about the constraints, and do you think there is some knowledge or processes that more general startup sectors could incorporate?
If there's a different process, it is about making sure you get the people you need to talk to, and if the company itself can't do it, there are obviously other companies that you can ask them to do that for you. But making sure that, to me, that the target audience is reached and the data is used, and it's easier said than done sometimes.
Okay, thank you. So shall we move on to the exciting bits today? So thank you all firstly for answering the questions. That's been great. And obviously we got some lovely questions again. I think what we'll do is we'll share that with the panelists and have them reply back to them, because we don't want you to feel like we haven't answered any of your questions. So yeah, I'm going to just quickly share my screen with you guys.
I think this is where it gets exciting.
Yes.
Obviously, everything that we have shared and our panelists shared so far has been really, really insightful. And I want to say thank you to everyone. Personally, I don't have that much of experience in designing in finance, many other areas. So I've learned a lot today about some of the details, but also some of the just broader topics that I think we can all use, even if you not currently working in finance, probably can relate to a lot of these topics. And yeah, I'm excited to see what happens next here on the good luck screen.
Yes, so you can see that clearly, yeah? Oh, sorry, yeah, yes. Thank you all.
Thanks for having us.
For sure, it's been a lovely talk so far. Like, it's just so much to absorb. Yeah, so we've got our lucky screen here. So what we've done is the team in the background were picking out their favorite posts, and with a bit of luck, you might be one of the winners. So we, as Shakib said, we've got 2 amazing prizes that we want to share with you. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the second prize. So just so it's fair, yeah. So it's fair. We're going to randomly select names, and these names are going to be through this generator. And so far, we've had 3 that have been picked as their favorite. So the first potential winner is, if you can see the screen clearly, do let me know.
Well, we only have 3 people.
Yeah, we only have 3 people.
I think everyone in this event must be first timer.
Yes, yeah, I imagine so. That's okay. But
We'll see why. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Come back again.
You will be surprised.
You will come back again.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pick the first winner for the second prize, and I will tell you once we've picked the name. So picking at random. We got Piyash. If I've pronounced that right, that's the winner for the second prize, and the second prize is.
Wow. What is the second prize?
Wow, it's a £200 voucher towards any product sold in our Apple store, who obviously, as Shakib mentioned, is a sponsor of ours, called Sync. So you just need to, we'll obviously email your details to us, email us directly into the panelist only chat, and we'll get in touch with you and share that details with you. So
this is any product in our Apple store. Yes, we do have our own Apple store, which is, again, thanks to Sync, who offered us to have our community-based Apple store. So anything there, either the same price or towards something bigger. And of course, everyone gets 10% off if you want to buy anything Apple-like. We're going to share the link to our Apple Store in the Meetup discussion section at the bottom. Let's see who will win this first prize.
Oh yeah, so we've only got 2 left. So if we go back to the list, sorry, you've already won one, so I'm gonna. So it's out of Lou and Scott. So drum roll, if we've got one, we should have one. It's Lou.
Lou, congratulations.
So the first prize is, anticipation.
Yay.
So a 1-year subscription to Adobe Creative Cloud. So congratulations. And yeah, do share your email address to us so we can get in touch and share the information for you with there. So thanks to Megan from Adobe XD, who has and Sync for giving us the opportunity to share these amazing prizes with you. So yeah, which is great.
Well, this is obviously one part of UX Playground is the partnerships that we have with businesses who connect with us and want to support communities, and especially design communities who engage or who are basically sharing various topics. And we also have Rosenfeld Media, as mentioned, with lovely books, and that will be next time possibly on the list as well. So please stay in touch. If you haven't joined us on Meetup yet, please do so, because I know a lot of you came via Eventbrite or LinkedIn directly. Don't forget Meetup. This is where really we live. Of course, we have the UX Playground website, but the next event will be in February. Just what was it, 16th? I think so. Yeah, I think it was the 16th. Nevertheless, we will be announcing it.
We'll share the details.
Yeah, we will share the details in our Meetup, and it will be all about wellness and designing for wellness and well-being. Well-being is the big
I'm really looking forward to
word.
That one.
Thank you so much. A big thank you to the panelists for the great contributions and for taking the time to share all of this with our members. Thank you for taking the time, of course, our members and everyone who's new to UX Playground. We'll see you soon. Stay safe.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.